Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Transaction Podcast, episode 4 of season 3. I really hope that you enjoyed our last episode with Jordan Gray and had lots of giggles, as I know that I did. I even re-listened to some of it and thought, I can't believe that I shared that. I think Jordan said the same on her Instagram. She was encouraging her listeners to, her audience to go and listen. And she said, I can't actually believe some of the stories that we shared in that episode. So definitely a good laugh. If you haven't heard it, go back and have a listen. Today I am joined by this really amazing bloke called David McQueen, and he is an entrepreneur, professional speaker, facilitator and executive coach. He's worked with some really big names, including BP, JP Morgan, Virgin Media, Barclaycard, Shell, BBC, Asda, Sainsbury's, Bloomberg, Deliveroo, Google, HSBC, Mercedes-Benz and Sky, to name a few. I first met David at a conference some years ago now, and I can't remember even what he was talking about. All I remember was that I was super engaged, and then we bumped into each other at lunchtime, ended up sat out at the same table and were having a good laugh. I had bright blue hair at the time, as was my signature for many years. And he sat down, he said, my daughter's just done that. And I said, how did it go down with her mum, i.e. his wife? He was like, yeah, not well. So we had a really good laugh from the outset. David is such, not only is he amazing at his job and teaching people about good leadership, but he demonstrates that a lot in himself as well. I've followed him on LinkedIn ever since, and I love how vocal he is and how authentic he is, particularly when it comes to racial issues, racism, anti-blackness, all of that kind of thing. He puts things in a really honest way. He doesn't kind of criticize anybody else in the process, but he makes his values really well known. And I can say really confidently that as an activist, it means a lot to me to see people who are a little bit more experienced in these areas than I am, because so often a lot of the people that I'm talking to are younger than me and are looking up to me for some kind of clue, and obviously no one person can provide that for everybody. But leadership is important, and I think particularly for me, I know that I didn't have that representation when I was younger, so I'm trying to be that for the younger generation, and it can get a bit kind of lonely at times. So when I come across people like David, I'm always so grateful that they're still going strong. They're still very vocal about what they believe, what they think is right, and they're very firm in their boundaries. So David always brings value to every single interaction that I've ever seen him have, even if that's to lay a boundary and say, I'm not into that. So super, super valuable. And I'm really grateful that he found time in his, what I know is a very busy schedule, to come to us, to me and my lovely audience, you lot, to talk about some important stuff. So just before we start, just a little reminder to message me or come and find me on Facebook under the Transaction Podcast, Instagram at Transaction Podcast, Twitter at Transaction P, or even TikTok at Transaction Podcast. You can also join our little mailing list for a once weekly email, just with the important stuff, no fluff. That's at mooksharrishill.com/transaction. You just put your name and your email in a green box, and then it's all done. You don't have to do anything else. And we'll send you an email when there's a new episode out, or if there's any exciting news that we want you to know about. So without further ado, here is my interview with David McQueen. In a time of great change, we're all making efforts to become more ethical, more educated people. The Transaction Podcast interviews people from many different backgrounds to bring different aspects of human rights to life through humour, authenticity and personal stories. We are privileged to get a glimpse into different people's realities and to get first-hand advice and information from people on the front line of great social change. I'm Harris Eddie Hill, inclusive coach, speaker and educator, and this is the Transaction Podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Transection Podcast, where I'm joined by David McQueen. Hi David, thanks for joining us.
Hey, pleasure to be here, Harris. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you. And tell us, David, a little bit about what you do for your work.
So I run a company called Q Squared. It's a leadership development and culture change company I run with my wife. And we get to work with organizations in the private, public, and third sector, just around how we can develop better leadership skills and how we can develop more inclusive cultures.
Nice. And I met you, David, at a conference about 5 years ago, we reckon. And
Ambition. Yeah.
yeah, that was cool. And I remember as I was listening to you, you were talking about all these kind of big names. Not that I'm encouraging you to name drop, but just give us a little like taste of some of the work that you've done, and in you know,
Yeah.
companies that are playing a big role in the market at the moment.
Yeah, as you know, I hate to do the name dropping unless it kind of like gets me through a certain door. But
Yeah.
I have been fortunate. I've worked a number of years with a couple of groups in Virgin. I've worked with car companies like Mercedes and BMW. Worked in a lot of work in banking and technology, so Google, Facebook, Twitter, Barclays, JP Morgan, etc., etc. And actually, I better say Lloyd's and HSBC because they're my recent clients. I better make sure I plug them as well. But yeah, it's an interesting space, and every single one of those clients have different cultures and approaches. And so I learn as much as I teach, and that's the thing that really I enjoy about this. That I'm going into these opportunities, not just coaching and getting people to learn, but understanding how people see the world through different lenses as well.
Yeah, that's cool. How has it been for you? You know, you talk so much on LinkedIn about racism and anti-blackness and stuff, and then at the same time you're interacting all the time with people who are kind of at the top of their field or at the top of their hierarchy, and as we know, because we hear it all the time, so much of the people holding power at the top of like these really big companies are white men, cisgender heterosexual white men. So how is that for you? And surely there are times when you're like, Jesus, give me strength. You know, you have to take a breath.
Yeah. It's really interesting. My daughters laugh at me because I have this little mantra that I say sometimes when you go out in life, just assume everybody's stupid, and then that's the base you can start with, and then you can build from there. And they said, Dad, that's the way to look at life. I go, yeah, but sometimes you just don't get disappointed when you look at it that way. But for me, I go into all these spaces, and I go with a good intent. Even sometimes when I see, to your point, sometimes I hear and I see things and I'm like, Jesus, what, seriously, guys, is this, is this where we're going? And then I go, okay, let me give people the benefit of the doubt until they prove me otherwise. And very often there are individuals who are quite surprised because they think that I'm going to come in there and tell them what to do. And I said, no, I'm coming in here to have a conversation with you, and I'm going to ask you lots of questions because that's what a coach does. I'm going to facilitate. I'm going to ask you as many questions as possible, but I'm also going to challenge some of the assumptions. And more often than not, there are individuals who are willing to sit down and listen and think, how can this work? And if I'm really honest about the way that I believe I get my foot in the door is, yes, you got the badge names that we just mentioned before, but because I have got a background, my first career was in accounting and my second career was in IT. So because I have a commercial background and I can align how having positive, inclusive cultures can really benefit them on the bottom line, lots of people get excited about that. And I can tell you for a fact that it gets me more traction telling them that than coming with the moral case. But once I get through the door, then I can build the case out even bigger. So I tend not to get frustrated because I think if I did, that the amount of energy and the amount of the amount of energy and the anger and the frustration that will come out would stop me from doing my job effectively as I will do. So I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. There are going to be times where I will get slightly frustrated, but then I go, okay, look, this is bigger than me. A lot of the work that I'm doing now, I call it acorn planting. I want to plant acorns for an oak tree that I may never sit under, which sounds so hippie, right? Like some real
I love that though.
Hippie philosopher. But I love the idea that you're creating a momentum or being part of the momentum or a movement that allows people to see things slightly smaller and just see the growth of it. But then, future generations can really benefit from it. Like I've benefited from the work that future generations have got done in order for me to be here.
Yeah, that's lovely. So I think it's that focus, isn't it? And I don't know about you, David, but sometimes when I get the angry people who react to our kind of like pushing boundaries and asking these big questions, people like, oh, you just need to accept how things are. And actually, I think that people who do the sort of work that we do, talking about inclusivity, we're masters at accepting and understanding how things are right now.
Yeah, yeah, and I would definitely agree with you. There is so much around um, accepting it is what it is, but not accepting that there is room for change.
Yeah.
I'm of a belief that you've got to see the world as it is before you can see it as you want it to be. And you've probably seen the amount of times that people have come for me on LinkedIn and kind of like come with their angry kind of really bad arguments, and I look at it and I just think to myself, man, if this was a debating society, I would have kicked your ass to the curb by now. All right, I really would have. I would have demolished your argument. But I realize that it's also an opportunity for people to really expand their thinking. If I can give a quick example.
Yeah.
So as we're recording today, there was a report that's come out from the government from this race and whatever inclusion committee, and the conclusion that's come out of it is that Britain does not have institutional racism. So I'm like, dude, like, there have been 7 reports, like the Lammy report, the Windrush report, the Angelini report, the race disparity audit, the Parker review. So many of these reports have come out. The McGregor review about racism at work as well, and all of these have come out with recommendations, and they've come out with individuals who are uh, people in their areas who are well researched, who are both academic or business experience, and they've given these recommendations for organizations to follow. And now we've got a group of individuals coming out and saying like it's not, and we're the beacon to hold up to the world. And I'm like, okay, all right. I think we really need to recognize that we still need to have this conversation. And there was a gentleman who came onto my wall on LinkedIn and said, look, I wish we'd all stop talking about race because, we just need to get on with ourselves and just love each other as we are and be humans and what have you. And I read it and my heart kind of sunk for a moment. And then I was like, okay, what can I do as a way of being able to explain it slightly differently? And I thought in my mind, I can really go in there and go, look, at the end of the day, as a black guy, when I jump into my car, I have to be conscious of the fact that if I get pulled over by police, how I respond, the tone I use, the pace I'm speaking at, how I do myself, is a conscious stuff that I'm always having to do. Or if I have members of my family that are going into the hospital or the healthcare system, in my mind, I'm wondering, okay, are they going to be able to appreciate members of my family around pain management, around medication? Because the way a lot of the literature is designed doesn't take into consideration that, because they think that people with darker skin or from African and Caribbean backgrounds can take pain more than other racial groups. These are the kind of conversations that I wanted to bring to the fore. And I said, no, let me take it back a bit. I said, white working class kids in the UK are the most underachieving ethnic group as a whole across the board. And as a result, this has a knock-on effect on things like housing, around poverty, around access to finance, and around health outcomes as a whole. I said, one can dismiss that it doesn't happen, but the reality is that white working class, when we break it down, that's what actually happens. So what you do is, rather than just say, oh my God, oh, it's just class and what have you, you roll up your sleeves and you work with individuals to go, what are the circumstances or what are the causes for this happening? And what can we do on the one hand, where individuals like myself who used to work in education can go in, can encourage young people, can work with schools where their attainment raises, where they get better exams, where we give them the option to start thinking about going to college or to university or taking apprenticeships, which they never had before. We create that space. And then on the other side, you've got people doing policies and procedures and employees trying to hire individuals from those underrepresented areas. We don't ignore that it happens. We recognize whatever label you want to put on it, that it happens, and we have an honest conversation about it without guilt, without blame, but aim for a solution. So a couple of people sent me messages and they were just like, I would have never actually thought that you would have come at it at an angle of talking about white working class people affected by racism. And I said, well, that's part and parcel of it. That's part of the knock-on effect. And for me, to your point, there are going to be points where we go in and we can go, oh, this is going to be really frustrating, overwhelming. And there are some times where I'm not going to lie to you, Harris. Sometimes I just get pissed off and I just want to kind of like burn down buildings and just tell people about themselves. And then I go, I've also got a responsibility not to always contain my anger, because there's sometimes I'm going to be angry, But there will be times where I just go, right, let me just break it down so you can see it through a different lens.
Yeah.
And if it's seen through that different lens, if it helps for you to get to that journey, then, then I'm happy. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. That's really cool. So, I mean, you were already in the area of culture change and making sure that companies are starting to ask the right questions and move in the right direction in terms of diversity. But how did the kind of Black Lives Matter explosion in 2020 impact your work? And do you think that it's helped the UK to address their issues, or do you think it's been a good excuse to look away?
So in my experience, which I always think is the best way to frame it, but in my experience, I think it's a combination of both. So I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of international global companies and do presentations for large cohorts. So I think in the last year, I've probably spoken to about 14,000 people via Zoom and all the rest of them. And there are those who have, the penny has dropped and they've gone, Dave, when you talk about things like racism, I think it's only somewhere else. I think it's happening in America, or I think it's apartheid in South Africa, or I think it's something, somewhere else. And I go, well, let me give you some examples of what it looks like here, being able to access it. And I give examples of, things like expulsion in schools for specific racial groups, or infant mortality in hospitals, or how the ratings on certain medical equipment like dialysis machines and other things are skewed in favor away from people who are of darker skinned or who aren't mainstream white. And I say this is not about putting blame on an individual person and saying, look, this is, I'm pointing at you and going, oh, you're a racist. No, it's not about that. It's understanding and having a real acknowledgement of what racism actually looks like. And also part of this conversation was being able to speak to a lot of non-white racial groups in the UK and get them to be aware of how racism has impacted that community as well. For example, there are big issues that people would never know around colorism. There are lots of I hate using the phrase, but I'm just going to use it just for the sake of this discussion. Ethnic minority. Oh, I just shuddered saying it. Okay, right? But just thinking of all the groups, of the minority groups in the UK, where things like skin bleaching and skin lightening and things like having to straighten your hair because they're afraid of going into an environment where they have natural hair because it might be deemed unprofessional, or they may not be able to go in front of an actual client. All these things are challenges that people have. You don't want to speak loudly because you might be assumed of being aggressive as opposed to assertive. And even in between those groups, between African and Caribbeans, or South Asians and East Asians, or even in their smaller areas, there's all these complex conversations that come out of a result of somebody saying to someone else, because you're a racial group, you are more superior than someone else. And the being able to put a British context on it, or contextualizing it as the issues that have happened. We've had deaths in police custody here as well in the UK. That's why the Angelini report was done in the first place. We have had problems with access and sentencing based on racial lines, which is why the Lammy review came up. These things happen, these things exist. And it was really important to use that opportunity when everybody was fully focused to go, all right, here's the situation. Like, I don't care about no damn statue. All right. Keep your damn statue for all you want in the middle of the town of some slave trader or whatever the hell it is. I don't care if the Tate Museum was built off the back of plantations and people want to change it. That's not my concern. For me, the deeper work is, once you know that history, and once you know where we are, and once you know that there are certain things or behaviors or practices or policies or rituals that disadvantage certain groups based on race, it's important to have an honest conversation as to how we got to that and what can we do to move it forward. So essentially, my work has a lot of my work in the last year around culture change has been with a lot of companies finally realizing and owning up to the fact that although this is the last taboo, I call it, talking about race at work, it was important to have that conversation. And more than anything else, what I wanted people to do in those conversations was to have a conversation and to not be afraid to be able to speak their mind, but speak their mind sensitively to the audience. Like, oh, I'm only going to speak my mind and say what I want. Don't want people to come in there and isolate or make people feel really bad. Go, how can we do this as humans and have a sensible conversation? And so that whole movement around, and obviously Black Lives Matter started 2016 or before, but it got really highlighted in 2020. And I think it was a real great opportunity for people to go, we don't really have this conversation because in many respects we pretend that it doesn't happen, but let's take this opportunity to see how it impacts our whole lives and how we can be better allies and support for each other as a result of that conversation.
Mm. Yeah, it's really well put. Break down for me. I mean, I don't particularly love the phrase ethnic minorities, but tell me why you hate it, or why or why it gives you the shivers.
Oh my God. I think language is really, really important, Harris. I think the way that um, we use terms and phrases and address each other is really important. Before we came on air, one of the things I admitted to you was, look, keep me accountable in the way that I use pronouns. Keep me very accountable in the way that I make reference to things, because, on the one hand, I can tell people that I'm a real champion and an ally for the LGBT plus community. But if I do that without asking questions, if I do that without being conscious of the language that I'm using, am I really an ally, or am I just centering myself as a way of just saying, oh, look, I'm over here being all good, but I don't give a shit how people, pardon me, sorry, I swore then.
No,
I don't give
it's
a
fine.
monkey how people, okay, I don't give a monkeys how people perceive that. I'm gonna do it my own way. And so the reason why I think language is really important is to understand the implications that it has. So with ethnic minorities, I understand why it's something that has been put in place, but it makes me feel uncomfortable because it's almost like an othering.
Yeah.
Whereas, there are, even when we start to even when we have that conversation. So let me give you another shudder. All right, this will probably surprise you, but another shudder that I have is around the labeling around LGBT plus, because there is so much complexity in that group around being, whether you're bisexual or gay or lesbian, and then all the other variations that are in there. All of a sudden, everybody's grouped into one. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be honest. I've been to a couple of gay clubs with my friends, and they have not been nice to lesbians. Okay, they have not been nice at all. And I'm like, okay, so this whole umbrella term doesn't really necessarily apply here. And in the same way, when I think about the phrase ethnic minorities, just like the word BAME, and obviously there was a history behind it, but black or Barmy, as somebody calls it, right? So black and minority ethnic groupings, black Asian and minority ethnic, should I say? What it was is it's basically a group that says, all right, everybody who's not white, we're going to whack you under this label. So you're not white, okay, well, let's call you BAME. Or if you're not white, okay, let's call you ethnic minority. And there is something about taking away the identity and the individuality of people when we just have that grouping. I understand it because sometimes people want to be able to make sure that they get the correct terms. But very often I just move away from it, because in essence, the term ethnic minority in Britain refers to racial groupings that are majority ethnic around the world. And so when you're tackling that term, it can, I don't get me wrong. I don't beat people up if they use the term. If they use the term BAME, or I'm like, it's not for me. I will use something else. But I'm not going to beat somebody up over it. But there is power in language and being able to understand how people identify themselves and how they represent themselves, and all the assumptions that come with those labels as well. So that's why when I shudder, it's just like, I don't like it, because it's just so lazy. It's so lazy to make that grouping without thinking about, there are so many elements in those groups that we really need to think about and address, and the way that I may see the world will be quite different from somebody from West Africa. It may be very different from somebody from Bangladesh or from Pakistan or India or Taiwan or Philippines. But if we're under the grouping ethnic minority, there's this homogenous group that you all put together, and we're like, okay, well, there's a hell of a lot of difference there. And that's just my pushback. It's just about how much effort are we going to make in order to be able to move forward in having a more broad and more inclusive piece of language, so that people feel that they have a sense of belonging.
Yeah, I agree. I saw quite a fun like a badge, like a pin yesterday on somebody's like Etsy store or something, and it said alphabet mafia on it, meaning everyone under the LGBT plus umbrella.
Yeah.
And I quite enjoyed that. I thought that was a lot of fun. But like you say, I think it's interesting. I do think that there's a lot more unity potentially with the younger generations. I mean, you know, I left secondary school in the, I don't know, like 15 plus years ago. I'm in my 30s now. And even then, like, you know, some of the girls at my school were lesbian, and I at the time identified as bisexual, and there was even shade then, like between the different groups. And then, but you
Yeah.
know, you all got bullied by the same kids though, the same straight
Yeah.
kids, or supposedly straight.
Yes.
And yeah, it was a lot more, everyone was out for each other. But I think, I don't know what you think, but I think that the whole infighting is often instigated or encouraged by the people in power or the mainstream identity, because it,
Oh, yeah.
you know, without unity we're weak. But if we all came together and
Oh,
said, you know what, we're all going to be friends over this, then I think
yes. Yeah.
there'd be the
Oh,
people in
totally.
power would be screwed.
Totally. And you see it so many times where wherever there are, whenever you look at a really strong political movement that has a threat to mainstream power, things are done to really undermine it.
Mm.
Things are people and things are put in place to undermine it. Whether that, I'm not going conspiracy theory here, right? There's enough in the history books, people can go away and read it properly. But whether that's individuals who are infiltrated by the local government and their specific forces, or whether it's actors who are just going in there who have got an intention of destroying that kind of narrative. So, for example, to the point that you're making, you know, the Home Secretary made a report when they were doing this police and crime report bill that, you know, she didn't think that Black Lives Matter was a legitimate movement and all the rest of it, and it was, you know, all it did is created, they were can't remember the phrase now, but kind of like the protesters and rioters and what have you. And I'm like, Black Lives Matter is a lot more than one political group to decide. It's a movement of individuals saying, look, what we want you to realize is that how we access the world and how many of us see the world, and you know, and even when we travel or whatever we do, sometimes we have to be really on our guard. So we just want people to be aware of that, to marginalize it and put it in that group, and for individuals to go, oh, it's just a political group over there that goes around attacking statues. And I'm like, you know what, I know people who went on that march and they were just absolutely peaceful, and they were like, who are these people going up there and destroying these statues? They had no idea who they were, and they weren't affiliated with any one of the actual political or activist movements. So to your point, I always see that there are people who are in positions of power who will do all that they can to hold on to that power, even if it means going and disrupting those ones who are pushing back against it. So yeah, I absolutely, totally agree with you. So as just a quick aside, if I can, so I get
Yeah,
excited
yeah,
here.
go for it.
But I was looking at a video on the weekend by the American rapper Lil Nas X. And so Little Nas had said, you know, he had given himself a promise that when he was younger, he was going to come out, but he would do it very silently and he will do it in his own way. He obviously had this song, it blew up, it got, you know, transcended rap and country, absolutely blew up. But then, you know, obviously individuals found out that he was gay. He took hold of the narrative himself and just said, look, this is who I am. And this is what it is. And then people, oh, he's had such a nice rhythm, but I'm not listening to that anymore. What have you? He's gay, and so he's gonna, you know, he's dancing with the devil, and he's going to hell. And he goes, all right then, if that's how you think of me, I'm gonna do a video of me dancing with the devil. And he does this major, massive. I think it's a brilliant piece of art. All right, I'm gonna say this now, where he slides down a pole and he's dancing with the devil, and then he kills the devil and all the rest of it. And now you get all these people going, oh my God, America is going to ruin. This is why, you know, we give to the LGBT pluses, if you give them the narrative, they're going to take it over and destroy the moral fabric of the world. I'm like, listen, some of you guys are marrying kids at age 12 up in Utah, right? In the name of religion. And you got concern over a dude sliding down a pole in a pair of red Nikes and doing a dance, doing a lap dance on the devil and killing him. That's what you're worried about, and that's what you think is going to attack the moral fiber. Some of you guys are out here shooting people without a license and doing all kind of stuff. And when something happens, you go, oh, you know, they were slightly mentally ill or a lone wolf. And you think one person doing this is going to mess it up. And you look at that, to your point, you look at that and you realize it's a power play here.
Yeah.
It's a power play.
100%. Well, exactly. It's like it's a constant sanction of like, these wrongs are okay and these ones are not a big deal, but we're going to make a big drama about it. And, you know, so much of the, you know, conversation I'm having particularly with allies, and
Yes.
particularly allies, well, would be allies or people who are considering it,
Yeah.
from America particularly, seem to be so scared of like, what if I let these people into my heart, and I'm okay with it, and what does this mean, and like, my sort of how I feel about my country and the laws here, it feels to me very wholesome. And I'm like, but you still have child marriage
Yes.
in your country, you still have conversion therapy allowed in your country, which scientifically we know doesn't work, it just traumatizes people. And
Yes.
even the
Yeah.
conversion therapists admit that. So I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can't say that all of that stuff doesn't matter and just this one thing you're not really sure about, because if you're really serious about your morals, we need to strip it back. There's a
Yes.
whole list. There's a whole
Yeah.
list here.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's selective. It's selective amnesia,
yeah,
isn't it? That's what
yeah.
I call it. Selective amnesia. And without disrespecting the actual condition, people choose the bits that they want to focus on that allow them to feel better in the way that they navigate the world. And what it does is it erodes and eradicates compassion.
Mm,
So, they will, I remember I was having a discussion with somebody about the case that we had here in the UK about hoteliers not wanting to have same-sex couples, um, share, have a hotel room or what have you. And I'm like, people are like, well, it should be, they should be able to exercise their faith. And I said, yeah, of course they should be. But I said, but they should also know that they will get held accountable if, as a business, you are prejudiced towards somebody who wants to use your services. And people are like, well, that's not the case. I said, well, if I went there and I went to hire the room as a black man, and I was told that I couldn't hire it because the people didn't like, out of their faith, they felt that I was a son of Ham, and so I was a descendant of or a Gentile. I was a descendant, an inferior descendant, and I'm not allowed to get in there. What would happen? Oh, well, that's different. I said, well, it's not. It's not different, because it goes to the heart of compassion. And to your point, yeah, people are just afraid of letting go, and they will just stay doing crap and justifying it left, right, and center.
yeah. Do you know what? Kahindi, I don't know if you know, but Kahindi Andrews is a professor and an author of Black
Yes.
Studies at Birmingham University,
Yep.
and he, in an
Okay.
interview, I heard him use the term. Oh, it slipped my mind now, but it was something. It was like white psychosis. This whole thing where like so much of these kind of belief systems don't make any sense, and they really come
Yes.
from these really bizarre hang-ups and kind of leftovers of, and how when you actually break it down, it's just all bollocks.
Yeah. No,
and
and that's it. That's it. Yeah.
and yet it plays such a huge part in our society, and how we view each other, and just everything. And I do think that when you're part of I won't say minority, but like, if when you're part of a group that is not automatically kind of catered to or considered,
Yes. Yeah.
you see that everywhere you go, every time you leave your house, and for some of
Yes.
us it's in your house.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
and then I think, so for people to say like, oh, this happens elsewhere, or this isn't, I just think your world and your lens, and like, it has to be so small and so limited. And to me, that's like a bit sad, but also
Mm.
infuriating.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
would you recommend, like, people who are getting into your area of diversity and stuff, like, how would you recommend that people keep their cool, or look after themselves, or nurture themselves whilst they're doing this very important work?
So I believe that it's a combination. It's a combination of things. I think the first one is understanding why they want to do it in the first place. I shared this little snippet on LinkedIn yesterday where I said, before we change the world, we need to think about how we change our world. What is it that we're doing to change our behaviors, our attitudes, and how we see it? And a lot of that is about seeing, if we're going to go into this kind of work, what reason are you actually doing it for? What's the bigger picture? So, you can look at it in terms of I, or me, and see how this impacts what it is that you're doing. You can look at it in the bigger sense of, we, how is this going to impact all of us, and how is this going to be able to roll out? and then I say, and us, how does it really factor out for us? And starting to really explore that stuff, recognizing that you may push up against some stuff that might not be comfortable, but be okay with the fact that you're going to have a lot of that discomfort. Because when you look at the bigger picture, you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the communities around you and the impact and the talents that you can bring. The second bit is, for me, is just around getting some real routines and rituals around self-care. So I journal. I write in my gratitude journal every night. I'm grateful, like even silly things, like I'm grateful for the shower. I'm not even playing, right? I love my shower, right? I can't remember what they're called. What the big square shower heads called? I
Or
can't
like a
remember whatever they're
waterfall
called.
one, or
Yeah, like rain, whatever. It's a great
yeah.
waterfall, what have you, those kind of things. I'm grateful for that, right? Because being able to go out when I'm really stressed, right? Or even if I've come back from one of my walks and exercise, and just being able to stand under that stuff and just think and not have to talk to anybody and just be there. That stuff I am truly, truly grateful for, because in the grand scheme of things, probably about 20% of the world have a shower, running shower, if that. So I'm really grateful for that. And so when I start to focus on those things, it really makes me grateful. I also make sure that if there are moments I'm doing this work and I feel a sense of burnout or stress or what have you, I take a step back. I clear that diary. And there may be existing work in there. And again, I'm in a position of privilege where I have been able to, over the years, build up capacity and have a number of revolving clients that I can work with. But I will also make capacity to make sure there's nothing there. Next week is my birthday week. I'm off. I don't care. Don't care who you are, what client, or how much you're paying me. You have to wait till the 12th in order to be able to get hold of me, because I am off. And I'm going to take that time to recover. I'm going to take that time to renew. All that kind of, oh, I emailed you last week. I'm happy for you. I was on bloody holiday. You will wait until I get back in there. I absolutely don't care. Or people trying to call. So one of the things I have as well is on my phone. If you're not a member of my family and you cannot get hold of me after 10, my phone will not ring. It's on do not disturb. You can't get hold of me on a weekend. Again, you can email me all you want and I'm happy for you, but the email is just going to go in there and I will not touch it until Sunday afternoon when I need to do it. Saturday, I'm not touching it. I'm just not doing it at all. So all those practices that I've built in are just ways of saying, how do I give myself self-care first, and then be able to go and be my best person when I'm there and acting with other people. So again, as I say, just to reiterate, the first bit is find out why you're doing it in the first place and what's that bigger impact around the communities that you want to have an impact, whether it's within work, whether it's in civic organizations or your community. And then the second bit, and again, it's not in the same order, but just however you do it, the second bit is making sure that you really, really practice self-care. Take that time out to practice self-care, because I've seen it burn a lot of people out. I've seen it get a lot of people frustrated and angry who want to go and just set flipping the Houses of Parliament on fire or what have you. And I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. It's not that deep. Let's make sure we go through this right, nice and easy. Take a nice deep breath. Let's reset and let's go and do this again.
And I think as well, yeah, that's brilliant. And I think as well, I would add a third thing if it were me, which is making sure that you've got community.
Yes.
Because you need that downtime where you don't have to fucking explain what you mean or why the joke's funny or, and, and knowing that you're like 100% seen and that people get it. And it's, you don't, that you're, I think it's exhausting. I think it's exhausting spending time with people who don't get it. And even if they mean well, even if they're so lovely, if they don't get it, they're not hearing the same things that you're hearing, when you're like, oh, for goodness sake. And then they're like, why, what was the issue? Do you know what I mean? I think it's so exhausting having to constantly, like for some people, they call it code switching. And then for me, I don't really know. I just think sometimes, and in the trans community particularly, we have so many good jokes that are like really, really hilarious. So the number of times I've wanted to share it, or I've laughed, and one of my cis mates or my siblings or something, like, what are you laughing at? And I show it to them and they're just like, I don't even know what they're saying. I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it.
I always say it's frequency. Be okay with your frequency. And the fact that sometimes while you're on FM, some people are still on AM, right? And they will not get it, right? You can upgrade the damn radio. You can give them new batteries. You can give them Wi-Fi. They're still going to be on AM and they're not going to get it. You just go and you just laugh and you do your thing on FM and don't, especially, and I really resonate with that, having that sense of community.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. David, would you, for people who are really wanting to make sure that their home and work cultures are moving forward, what are the sort of key things that you would want them to think about?
So in terms of the work I do, having a balance between home and making sure that you show up at home and in the community as well.
Yeah, but also how, like, how are we making sure that our homes are inclusive and the conversations we're having at home and at work
Oh
are,
yeah.
sort of looking at the structures of how we're doing things and making sure that we're
Yeah.
updating.
A lot of it is around. Firstly, let me put this out here. A lot of it is bloody hard work to the
Yeah.
point I actually find it, to your point about exhausting, I actually find it more exhausting to do that work within familiar territory with family and friends, as it
Yeah.
were, who may not necessarily be 100% of where I'm coming from than I do in the workplace. Because in a workplace, I can have a bit of emotional detachment. I could be like, "You're a prick. I'm going to do this. Give me my bloody check plus VAT and reparations. I'm bouncing. I'm gone. All right, I'm done. I've given you the work. Right? You do what you is going to do with it, and I'm gone."
Yeah.
Having these kinds of conversations within a family stroke familial stroke friend, especially when you don't want to be there, as it were. Bloody hard work. Bloody
Mm.
hard work. There are times where even when you really lay the groundwork down, I've heard people say, oh, they'll make a homophobic joke or what have you, and they'll go, oh, I know Dave's going to get offended by that, and I'm looking at them like, can I swear on your podcast?
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
You're such a freaking asshole. You really are, 100%. In the levels of assholery, you are like the premium, right? Like out of this world, like platinum assholery. And I look, but then sometimes I say, do you want to go there today? Do you actually want to go there today? No, 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 we don't. We know how sensitive you can get. And I go, no, we can go there. We can really, really go there today. And you say, whoa, Dave can't take a joke. But then I go, no, but it's important to recognize that a lot of the stuff that we will manifest or we will speak within our small groups, it doesn't take much for it to overspill into other areas of our lives. It doesn't take much. And so having that sense of responsibility, it's tough. But the way I say and the way I do it, most importantly, is I know what my extended family is like, and I know exactly, I come from a tradition in terms of religion and even in terms of culture, which was very kind of Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christian throwback. So what that meant, there was a hell of a lot of homophobia. I think I might have talked about it to you before, but I remember going through my early teens and early 20s and being in church and preaching, and even if I didn't say something explicitly, there was an underlying theme. But then I always found that in my church, anybody who was coming out as gay, lesbian, or bisexual used to come and talk to me, and I'm like, hold on a minute, like, did you not kind of hear the little shade I dropped in something over there? And they go, Dave, we know you're compassionate about that stuff. We just know you're getting all hyped about this stuff. We know you're compassionate about it. And then it got to a point where I realized, hold on a minute, how come everyone's coming to me to talk about it? What kind of energy am I giving off here? And then I started to kind of like really unravel it and started to challenge it left, right, and center, challenge it. And so by the time I kind of left organized religion and church, a lot of people knew that it was coming anyway, because I just felt that I couldn't be part of a system that put down individuals from different backgrounds, be it around their sexual orientation, be it around their ethnicity or whatever it is. I just wasn't signed up for that. So I've just really drawn a line in the sand. But more importantly, I just go within my household, with my wife and with my children, that what we do, I can't call them children anymore, they're adults, but with my daughters now, what we do is we create spaces where we will have conversations that will be very robust, that will be very tough, and we keep each other accountable. Because I know that there's only a certain amount of what I can control within my household in terms of the way that we operate. And that's my sphere. Outside of that, I will tell people this is where I am, and if you're not happy with it, I'm happy. I won't come to your house. Oh, what do you mean? No, I won't come to you. I'm not coming to your house. If that's what you're going to carry on, like, I'm not coming to your house. And people are like, you're a bit difficult. Okay, trust me, you ain't seen difficult yet, right? This is just a difficult house. You haven't seen difficult yet. But I won't come. If that's the attitude you're going to have, I'm not going to come to your house, because you know what my values are. You know what I stand for. Some of my very close mates are from the LGBT plus community. So what you're doing is, while you're taking this opportunity to be dismissive, or even if people are being dismissive racially, I have to think of my wider friendship group. And if you're going to disparage the individuals that I hold dear in my heart, I don't want to be part of you. Thank you very much. And I'll bounce. And so people know that. And I'm like, that's the principle I stand for. These are my boundaries. These are my values. This is my line. If you cross that line, I will call you out. Don't care who you are. And I don't care what seniority you have in my family. I will call you out. And that's caused conflict as well. I'm like, I don't give a monkeys or a shit about all this hierarchy.
Yeah.
If you're a racist, homophobe, and you're my grandparent, I'm still calling you out. I'll do it politely. I'll throw that shade on you so nicely you won't even know how shady it was until I've left about an hour or two afterwards. I'm still going to do it. So, and I guess my dad said this to me the other day, because my dad was ill last year. He had COVID for 11 weeks. And what was actually happening, loads of people were trying to get hold of my mum and my family, and everybody was trying to, on WhatsApp. And I just came in, I just said, look, let's be really clear. I'm going to draw a line here. If you want to find out what's going on, contact me once a week. You try and contact me before that, I'll block you. I'll make it very straight. We're going to do that because I'm protecting my mum's health, and I'm protecting my mum's mental health, and I'm protecting my dad's physical health. You know what I'm like. For those of you who don't know what I'm like, go and speak to the other family members and they'll bring you up to speed. My dad was like, David, you got all the family terrified, like wondering what is it that David's actually bringing. I just said, nobody should be terrified. We just should be really clear of our boundaries.
Yeah.
So my main advice that I would really give is just know what those boundaries are. And it's not easy, and especially if you are a minority, as it were, even in your family. That's bloody hard work.
Yeah.
And to your point about having that sense of community, knowing that there are people around you, you can pick up the phone, send a message, talk to, what have you, that's crucial for your mental well-being. It's crucial for your own sense of, am I the only one in this world that's thinking everybody around here else is crazy as hell? It's important to have those people around you. So yeah, it's hard work, but I definitely believe it's doable. Draw those boundaries, have that sense of community, and make people know where you stand.
Yeah, that's beautiful, David. That's so powerful. And you know what? I think having that assertiveness and that boundary where you're just going, this is all I'm willing to do, this is where I'm drawing the line, I feel like that is more powerful, and that is so within everybody's right to do. And I feel like that speaks so more than so much of the kind of arguments and the things that we're getting involved in and stuff. And I do feel that some of the most powerful things that we ever do, and the most amazing things that people just can't come back at, really, is when we do it kind of in the way that you've just described there. And I think that's quite a difficult headspace to get in when you're used to being discriminated against, because it puts you in this mindset of like, I've got to fight for everything that I need, and you're constantly trying to like get people to listen to you. But I think it's more effective to draw those boundaries and be that assertive. And I think that is something that everyone we're advocating for needs more than anything, actually.
Yes.
Yeah,
definitely.
David, is there anything else you want to leave us with, or if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
No matter how many podcasts I do, I always get to this bit and I'm like, oh, what do I do? Okay, so most people see a lot of my opinions around leadership and culture change and equity and equality. They see a lot of that on LinkedIn. That tends to be my social media platform of choice. That's where I get to voice a lot of the strong thoughts and opinions that I have around the equity. So you'll see a dude standing like he's some preacher or something on a picture with a red jumper on. You'll see that there's David McQueen on LinkedIn. Or I've tested this. If you type in David McQueen in Google, right, it'll come up on the top 3 results. I've tested it now, so it will be there. Or go to davidmcqueen.co.uk. That's absolutely fine. And then just in terms of last words, for me, I think it's a lot of it is just around us as humans understanding and appreciating compassion. Compassion for me, I think, embraces so much. It's, we are living in a world where there is a lot of unkindness. There are a lot of individuals who are just trying to survive, and in trying to survive, they don't realize how they are stopping other people from thriving. And so for me, that compassion is important, to be able to listen to other people from where they come from. And even if you don't understand, ensuring that we have the language and the behavior that doesn't make the person who you don't understand feel like a pariah, feel like something that they don't have a sense of worth just because they're around you, whether that be around your race and ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your gender, or any other protected characteristic you have. People should be compassionate. And the fact is that we're all on a learning curve. And that compassion also means, for those of us who are fighting the fight as well, to have that little bit extra bit of patience around some of the people we really want to knock upside the head and knock them out, right? With just that little bit more compassion around them and go, okay, I could knock you out here, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And just being able to extend that. And it's not easy, and it's a daily practice, and it's a lifetime practice. And I don't think we will ever truly nail it. I think it's something that we're always learning. But for me, that big thing about communication, whether it's interpersonal with our family and our friends, or whether it's in the wider community, or whether it's in our places of work, I think we could really do with a bit more compassion. That'd be my big takeaway.
Yeah, I would second that. David, thank you so much for joining us today and for the value that you've added. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to see you. Okay, we have to do this again soon, somehow, somewhere. Okay.
Definitely.
All right, we'll make definitely. All right. A real pleasure.
Hey, and thanks so much for joining us today. Next week, I have this amazing woman called Sheila Bruno. Sheila came on to talk all about her book and her work. Her book's called Wife After Prison, and she works to raise awareness about post-incarceration syndrome. She talks very proudly about the fact that she is around about 60 years old and still doing amazing work and really living her life to the full. She's such a character, and she's so heartfelt in what she's doing, and it's just so important. I don't think that we can necessarily appreciate what people are going through when they're trying to reacclimatise to general everyday life after being incarcerated and trying to reintegrate. And Sheila does such a good job of really bringing that to life and explaining what it's about. So I really hope that you will get lots out of that interview, as I know that I did. So anyway, I will see you next week. Take care, friends.